Your exam scores aren't even good enough for a community college. You'll just embarrass everyone if you sit inside with the guests. This simple job will keep you occupied. Ethan, my older biological brother, stood beside her, jaw tight with frustration, eyes fixed on Nina, who was surrounded by distant relatives taking photos. Nina worked so hard to land a 4-year bachelor spot. We can't let anything ruin her big milestone today. Any guest that asks about your grades will drag down the whole mood of her celebration. Adrian, my childhood fiancé, paired with me through a decades-old family agreement, leaned against the wall beside Ethan, his voice cool and unyielding, no gentle tone he'd once used when we were small kids. Summer, this is the most important day of Nina's life. Just behave and don't stir up trouble for everyone. I clutched the canvas backpack slung over my shoulders tighter against my chest, bitter sorrow pooling heavy in my throat. Had I ever been anything but obedient for them? I'd aced every single middle school exam, landed top spot in the grade once, and Nina had broken down sobbing that night, threatening to slit her wrists over how inferior she felt next to me. The entire family had turned on me instantly, every single one of them laying blame for her self-harm, threats on my pride, and my show-off grades. From that day forward, I taught myself to intentionally tank every exam, deliberately hold back my full potential for 6 straight years of high school, letting my name linger dead last on every ranking sheet to keep Nina from spiraling into another meltdown. The National College Entrance Exam was the one chance I'd allowed myself to stop hiding, the single shot I had to chase my lifelong dream, without toning myself down for someone else's fragile ego. I stared at the crowd crowded around Nina, showering her with hugs, praise, expensive gifts, every face lit up with genuine joy for her acceptance to a mid-tier state university. The official admission letter for National University of Defense Technology, folded safely inside my backpack, burned a hole against my spine. I'd scored a 655, high enough to qualify for both MIT and China's top military aerospace program, yet the words sat trapped heavy behind my teeth, unspoken. If all of them thought I was a useless, failing student unworthy of attention, there was no point breaking the news to them right now. I'd leave for campus in 3 days, and none of them needed to know. I stood frozen in place, lost in my own swirling thoughts, until Ethan stepped forward and physically guided me down into the plastic folding chair by the entrance table. You're terrible at school, but you can still pull off this tiny task for us. Recording cash gifts is basic work. There's no excuse for messing it up. I lifted my gaze, and my eyes landed on the giant silk banner strung high on the wall above the dining hall stage. Congratulations, Nina. Admission to university. A bright future ahead. Ethan had hand-painted every brushstroke that morning. He'd spent hours practicing calligraphy just to craft that perfect banner for Nina's moment of glory. A quiet, unspoken question lingered in my mind, one I knew I'd never dare voice out loud. If I'd been the one accepted to a top military aerospace university, would he have stayed up all night painting a matching banner just for me? Before I could work up the courage to ask, Mom's repetitive nagging pulled me back to the harsh reality of the day. Summer, if any family friends ask about your test results, just tell them you've got somewhere to go next fall. Under no circumstances, admit you couldn't even hit community college cutoff scores. She'd repeated that exact warning at least 10 times since dawn, terrified my supposed academic failure would stain her reputation in front of all their relatives. She'd completely forgotten the origin of all this forced imbalance, the day Nina first walked through our front door after her parents died, saving Mom and Dad from a fatal car crash. 12-year-old Nina had caught sight of my full mark exam report card hanging on the fridge, then thrown herself into Mom's arms sobbing uncontrollably. Sister's so brilliant. Compared to her, I don't deserve to live in this house at all. That same night, she'd sliced her wrists with a kitchen paring knife. Mom's first reaction hadn't been comforting the traumatized orphan girl. It had been screaming at me. You knew Nina lost both her parents and was already fragile. Why would you flaunt perfect grades to hurt her feelings? Is your vanity really that important to you? She'd torn every single one of my award certificates and exam papers into tiny shreds right in front of Nina's tear-streaked face. At 12 years old, I knelt on the cold kitchen tile floor, picking up every crumpled paper fragment one by one, holding back my tears and forcing myself to understand Mom's overwhelming guilt over Nina's family sacrifice. To keep peace inside this house, I buried my talents deep, transformed myself into the lazy, unintelligent disappointment they all expected me to be. I squeezed my palm tight until my nails dug half-moon indents into my skin, then whispered a quiet, compliant reply. All right. Dad nodded in apparent relief, a hollow, patronizing smile tugging at his lips. We know your grades are poor, but as your parents, we'll still do everything we can to support you. We'll pay extra tuition to send you to a halfway decent community college, no matter the cost. A sharp, stabbing pain shot straight through my chest. Nina's academic performance had always been wildly inconsistent, never steady enough to guarantee a domestic bachelor's degree. Long before exam results were released, Mom and Dad had locked in a full overseas study plan for her, complete with prepaid housing and semester tuition deposits. Back then, I'd overheard them talking late at night in their bedroom. A community college diploma won't look good for Nina's resume. Even if her scores stay low, she needs an international bachelor's credential to stand out. I'd open my mouth to cut in and tell them I'd already been accepted to a top military aerospace university, ready to show them my official letter and share my big news. Adrian's voice cut through the room loud enough to drown out every syllable I'd planned to speak. And hail, before guests start pouring in, let's get a group photo with Nina while the space is empty. He tossed his professional digital camera into my hands, tone sharp and commanding, no room for argument. Summer, you take the picture for us. Mom and Dad immediately crowded Nina into the dead center of the group frame, Ethan and Adrian standing shoulder to shoulder directly behind her shoulders. Every single one of them moved into position with silent, unspoken coordination, leaving zero empty space for me to slip into the shot beside them. I swallowed the dry, scratchy lump stuck in my throat, fingers moving on autopilot to press the camera shutter, just like I'd done hundreds of times before when they wanted photos without me included. When I handed the camera back to Adrian, my voice soft and small, I voiced the quiet wish I'd carried for months. Can we take one photo of just the two of us? National University of Defense Technology ran on strict military closed campus management, and the campus sat 1,400 kilometers away from Adrian's university. I'd hoped to hold on to one picture of him before I left everything behind. Adrian froze for half a second, then let out a short, mocking scoff. You applied to a community college in my city anyway, right? We'll see each other all the time once the semester starts. No need to waste time taking a photo now. But Nina had also submitted her university application to the exact same city as Adrian's school. The last faint thread of quiet hope I'd clung to for him frayed and snapped completely inside my chest. My gaze drifted back to my backpack resting against the wall, the thick admission letter tucked safely inside its main pocket. I'd originally planned to seek Adrian out alone first, to share my incredible news with the person I'd grown up promised to marry. Now, I felt a wave of quiet gratitude. I'd never said a word about my acceptance to anyone yet. The banquet dragged on for hours, guests flooding through the front door nonstop, handing over cash envelopes I dutifully logged into the leather ledger Mom had given me. Every guest stopped to gush over Nina's academic achievement, pausing only to glance at me behind the gift table with awkward, pitying side eyes once they heard my supposed community college fate. No one bothered to ask a single question about my own future plans. By the time the final guest departed well after midnight, my wrists ached from hours of scribbling names and monetary amounts, and my throat felt raw from forcing constant, polite smiles for strangers. I watched the whole family gather around Nina in the banquet hall center, passing her piles of cash and luxury gifts, and I knew without a shred of doubt, the quiet, self-sacrificing girl who'd hidden her brilliance for 6 years was gone forever. This is your college startup fund, baby. All the money from today's celebration belongs solely to you. College has so many hidden expenses: textbooks, dorm supplies, travel. If you run short at any point, just come straight to us. No hesitation. Dad grinned wide and pulled a black metal bank card from his wallet, pressing it into Nina's free hand right on top of the cash pile. Nina threw both arms around Mom's waist, nuzzling her cheek with bright, unbridled joy. Mom, Dad, you're the best parents anyone could ever ask for. I'm so lucky to be your daughter. Her gaze drifted over to me standing silent by the wall, and she tilted her head with a performative, gentle kindness that never once reached her eyes. Biggs has got into college too, right? How about I split half this money with you to help you get set up? Mom instantly pulled Nina back into a hug, cutting her off before I could open my mouth to respond, her tone sharp and dismissive toward me, without a second thought. This reward money is yours, earned fair and square from your hard work getting into university. There's no reason to hand any of it over to her. Mom turned to face me directly then, her lips pressed thin with undisguised disdain. Don't go envying Nina's good fortune, Summer. This whole mess is all your own fault for slacking off all through high school. She let out a long, dramatic sigh, shaking her head like my existence was a constant weight on her shoulders. We'll scrape together enough tuition to get you into a halfway decent community college, but once you're enrolled, you'll need to pick up a part-time job to cover your own living costs. Don't come running to us begging for extra cash like you're entitled to anything. Her casual dismissal pressed a heavy, suffocating weight against my chest. I'd grown tired of deliberately tanking my exam scores to keep Nina from falling into suicidal spirals, so halfway through sophomore year I'd made a quiet test of my family's priorities. I'd stopped holding back, scored just high enough to land a single rank above Nina on the semester transcript. When the report cards came home that afternoon, Nina locked herself in her bedroom and cried nonstop for 8 straight hours, her voice thin and broken through the door frame. I study every night until 2 a.m. just to scrape my top 20 in the class, and sister can cheat her way to a better score without even trying? Mom and Dad spent hours cooing over her, bringing her warm milk, snacks, endless reassurance to calm her fragile ego. The second Nina stopped sobbing, Mom marched straight to my room, her face tight with bitter disappointment. Summer, we thought you wanted to do better in school, but you're just competing with Nina for our attention by copying answers on exams. A crushing wave of helplessness washed over me right then, one I'd carried for years after that day. If I scored well, I'd hurt Nina's feelings and draw the whole family's rage. If I scored poorly, I'd become the useless disappointment they sneered at daily. Even when I only partially unlocked my real talent to test their reaction, I got labeled a cheater and a troublemaker. There was no winning with them, no matter what I did. Ethan stepped forward carrying a massive wrapped box set, passing it straight into Nina's waiting arms. Nina's eyes blew wide with shock, and she threw her arms around his neck, screaming with delight loud enough to echo through the empty banquet hall. Brother, you bought me the full premium tech bundle? I love you so much. I watched her tear open the wrapping paper, revealing a brand new flagship laptop, the latest tablet, and the newest model smartphone, every device top of the line, untouched out of the factory box. My fingers twitched at my sides, memory flaring hot in my mind from the night before. Ethan had stopped by my bedroom after dinner the previous evening, holding a thin, scuffed laptop with faint scratches on the chassis, only 3 months old, but clearly well used by him first. He couldn't meet my eyes as he handed it over, shifting his weight awkwardly from foot to foot. This laptop's barely seen any use, practically brand new. You never cared much about studying anyway, so a high-end device would just go to waste on you. This one's more than enough for basic research over 3 years of community college. He'd always operated this way, showering Nina with brand new, expensive gifts while pushing all his worn, leftover junk onto me, acting like I should feel grateful just to receive anything at all. It never crossed his mind that I was his blood sister, the one who'd existed in this family long before Nina ever stepped foot through the front door. I turned on my heel and headed toward my bedroom, ready to shut myself away from their hollow celebration. Before I could click the door shut behind me, Nina slipped through the gap, trailing close on my heels with curious, feigned innocence written all over her face. Mom, Dad, brother, Adrian all got me such amazing college gifts. I'm sure you bought me something too, right, sis? I never once felt genuine warmth toward Nina, and knowing I'd leave this house in 2 days with no plans to look back, I didn't bother forcing the polite, compliant mask I'd worn for 6 years. My voice came out flat, no softness or hesitation. No, I didn't get you anything. Nina froze for a split second, then broke into a light, pitying laugh like she'd expected exactly this response. I know you don't have spare money to buy fancy presents, so just grab any small trinket to give me as a token of your well wishes, okay? She didn't wait for my reply, pushing past me fully into my room, her gaze sweeping every surface of my desk until it locked onto the hand-carved aerospace rocket model sitting front and center. She reached out and curled her fingers loosely around its wooden frame, lifting it off the desk without asking for permission first. I tidied up your room for you this afternoon, sis, she chirped, voice sugary sweet like she'd done me a huge favor. All that useless clutter you left lying around got tossed out entirely. No need to thank me for cleaning up your mess. My blood turned icy in my veins, eyes darting wildly across the overturned drawers, scattered notebooks, torn drafts of my aerospace design sketches strewn all over the carpet. The thick black archival folder holding my NUDT admission letter, exam transcripts, and competition certificates was gone without a trace. I stepped forward fast, my tone sharp and unsteady, panic gnawing at every nerve. Who told you you could touch my personal belongings? Do you have any idea what was in that black folder? Nina tilted her head, feigning blank confusion, shrugging like my panic was completely overblown. Just some random old papers you never use, right? Total junk taking up desk space. I cleared it all out for you, spring cleaning style. Rage and terror tangled together in my chest, boiling over until I couldn't hold back any longer. My hand lifted before I could think twice, palm cracking hard across her cheek with a sharp slap that echoed through the quiet house. That folder held my university acceptance letter. How could you throw it away? Nina's eyes instantly flooded with thick, dramatic tears. She crumpled to the floor, clutching her stinging cheek, wailing loud enough to draw the whole household sprinting down the hallway within seconds. Ethan burst into the room first, face burning with rage on her behalf. He shoved me backward so hard I stumbled into the edge of my desk, then raised his palm and struck my cheek with a brutal, stinging blow of his own. Nina spent hours helping Mom with housework and decided to tidy your messy room as a nice gesture. But she did nothing wrong, and you repay her by hitting her. You're ungrateful, cruel, and impossible to live with. Adrian stepped in beside Ethan, crossing his arms over his chest as he shot me a disappointed, judgmental glare, fully aligning himself with Nina without a single question about what had sparked the fight. What critical paperwork could you possibly own? Your exam scores are rock bottom. That folder was nothing more than worthless scrap paper. You're just jealous Nina got into a 4-year bachelor's program, so you're picking fights to ruin her good mood. For 6 years, I'd hidden every late-night study session, scribbled advanced aerospace formulas in locked notebooks, and intentionally failed every regular exam to keep Nina from falling into self-destructive spirals. I pretended to zone out in class, hung out with slack-off classmates to sell the act of a lazy, unmotivated student, all to shield her fragile ego. I'd poured every spare minute into secret studying to nail the National College entrance exam, finally breaking free of the forced low grades I'd maintained for their sake, only for the man I'd grown up promised to marry to dismiss my life-changing acceptance letter as meaningless trash. My cheek burned fiercely where Ethan's blow had landed, but I ignored the throbbing pain, locking my gaze rigidly on Nina as I fought to keep my voice steady enough to demand answers. Where exactly did you throw that folder? Nina flinched backward, burying her face into Mom's shoulder as she sobbed, her words muffled by tears. Out in the building trash bin, the sanitation truck picked everything up minutes ago. The second the last syllable left her mouth, I spun on my heel and bolted out the front door without grabbing a jacket or shoes. I sprinted down the sidewalk as fast as my legs would carry me, eyes scanning every street corner for the large garbage collection truck she'd mentioned. I rounded the bend just in time to watch the truck's rear compactor disappear around the far street intersection, hauling the entire block's waste away to the central waste disposal station on the edge of town. I didn't hesitate for a single second. I flagged down a passing city transit bus, tossed the last cash I had in my pocket into the fare box, and rode straight to the industrial waste plant miles outside the residential district. When I arrived at the facility gates, I begged the on-site sanitation foreman to let me sort through the day's trash load, explaining that irreplaceable college admission documents had been mistakenly discarded. At first, he refused outright, stating company policy prohibited civilians from rummaging through waste files. I begged for 20 straight minutes, voice cracking with desperation, until he finally relented and unlocked the storage bay holding our neighborhood's garbage sacks. The air inside the bay reeked of rotting food, mold, and discarded household waste, sharp broken glass, rusted metal cans, and splintered plastic littered every surface of the towering trash mounds. I dropped to my knees without hesitation, tearing open black plastic garbage bags one after another, sorting through filthy, discarded food containers and discarded junk with my bare hands. Shards of broken glass sliced deep gashes across my fingertips, warm blood dripping down my wrists and mixing into the grime coating the garbage sacks, but I didn't pause to bandage the wounds. Every second wasted meant the compactor could crush my documents beyond repair. I dug for well over an hour, my knees raw and sore from pressing against hard concrete and jagged trash debris, my clothes soaked through with grimy wastewater. Just as my vision began to blur from exhaustion, my fingers brushed against the smooth black plastic cover of my archival folder tucked deep inside a crumpled grocery bag. I grabbed it in an instant, clutching the folder tight against my chest like I'd recovered a piece of my own soul. I held back messy, relieved sobs as I brushed rotten food residue off the cover, confirming every page of my acceptance letter and transcripts remained intact inside. My legs had gone numb from squatting for so long, so I hobbled slowly back to the bus stop, the folder pressed safely against my chest the entire ride home. When I pushed open our front door, the whole family sat comfortably around the dining table sharing a hot dinner spread, laughing and chatting casually like nothing catastrophic had happened an hour prior. The second they caught sight of my dirt-caked clothes, scraped bleeding hands, and exhausted, hollow expression, every smile on their faces froze solid. The warm chatter died instantly, replaced by thick, uncomfortable silence. Dad's face twisted into a scowl of irritation, the first comment out of his mouth a petty complaint instead of a single word of concern for my injuries. Look at the mess you've tracked all over the entryway carpet. You're getting mud and garbage filth everywhere. Adrian sighed loud, shaking his head like my frantic trip to the way station was nothing more than an overdramatic tantrum. Go wash yourself off first, then come sit and eat with us if you're calm enough. I swept my gaze slowly across every single person seated at that table. Mom, Dad, Ethan, Adrian, and Nina, all of them comfortable and unharmed, none of them having lifted a finger to help me when I'd raced out desperate to save my future. Not one of them had sent a single text or placed a single phone call to check if I was safe, or if I'd managed to retrieve my lost paperwork. I didn't utter a single word to respond to their shallow remarks, turning straight toward my bedroom to lock myself inside. I skipped dinner entirely, sitting on my bed to carefully wipe the dirt and blood off my archival folder, bandaging my sliced fingers with a spare roll of gauze I kept in my desk drawer. Through the thin bedroom wall, I could clearly hear the whole family continuing their dinner conversation, every topic centered around Nina's upcoming university life, her dorm decor plans, overseas travel opportunities, the new tech gifts Ethan had bought her. Not a single person mentioned me, or the admission letter I'd nearly lost forever. For the first time in 6 years, I felt no sharp, aching heartbreak listening to them prioritize Nina over me without a second thought. All lingering hope that they might ever see my talent, my dreams, or my pain had burned away completely during my hours digging through the garbage mounds. I pulled out my phone and set an early morning alarm for the next day, planning to pack every last belonging and leave for the military university campus at dawn, long before any of them woke up to slow my departure. There was nothing left for me to stay for in this house. The next morning, Mom woke up hours after my alarm went off, noticing my bedroom door stood wide open and my entire luggage vanished from the closet. Panic flickered across her face, but she brushed it off as a trivial morning walk at first as she took her seat at the breakfast table. Summer's being ridiculous again, probably out for a long morning jog to avoid us all. Ethan and Nina stared silently at their plates, refusing to acknowledge the empty bedroom. Dad frowned, a faint flicker of worry crossing his face as he picked up his phone to dial my high school homeroom teacher, MS. Walker, planning to ask her about my supposed low community college placement. He hit the speakerphone button before the teacher picked up, so every person seated at the table could hear the conversation clearly. Ms. Walker, this is Summer's father. I'm calling to ask about local community college options for her. Her exam scores are far too low for any four-year university track. A stunned, disbelieving tone crackled through the phone speaker the second he finished speaking, loud enough to echo through every corner of the dining room. Mr. Hale, Summer already received an official acceptance offer to National University of Defense Technology. She scored a 655 on the National College Entrance Exam, high enough to qualify for top-tier elite schools nationwide. She doesn't need a community college placement at all. Dead silence crashed over the entire dining room. Ethan's fork clattered loudly against his ceramic plate. Nina's jaw dropped open in complete shock. Mom shot straight upright out of her dining chair, her face drained of all color. Dad refused to believe what he'd heard, pressing the phone closer to his ear to repeat his question, embarrassed to admit he'd never known his own daughter's exam results. Teacher, are you certain you're talking about Summer Hale? The girl who consistently ranks dead last on every in-class exam. He hesitated to say the words, ashamed of how little attention he'd paid to my academics all these years. Ms. Walker's voice sharpened with frustration, clear disappointment in every syllable. There's no mix-up here. Summer's the highest-scoring student in our entire graduating cohort this year. She's more than capable of attending any top university in the country. How could her own parents be completely unaware of this life-changing news? Dad froze, speechless, as the teacher hung up the call without waiting for a reply. Every person around the table sat rigid, processing the bombshell revelation they'd spent 6 years blind to. Before anyone could absorb the truth, Nina spoke up in a small, doubtful murmur, planting seeds of doubt to protect her own fragile sense of superiority. Could sister have cheated on the national exam? There's no way someone who always fails regular tests could pull off such a high score out of nowhere. Ethan instantly nodded in full agreement with her theory, jumping on the accusation without a shred of evidence to back it up. That's the only logical explanation. Her final mock exam still placed her at the bottom of the class. There's no way she could legitimately jump to a 655 without copying answers off another test taker. She hid the letter from us because she knew her results were fraudulent. Adrian stood in the dining room doorway, having just arrived at the house mid-phone call, and he'd heard every single word Ms. Walker said through the speaker. His face blanched pale, lips trembling, yet he said nothing to defend me, only staring blankly at the table in stunned silence. Mom and Dad latched onto Ethan and Nina's cheating accusation instantly, desperate to reconcile the image of the worthless, failing daughter they'd built in their heads with the reality of my elite exam score. Dad dialed Ms. Walker's number a second time, his tone accusatory as soon as she answered. Ms. Walker, Summer's exam results must be invalid from cheating, right? The teacher's anger exploded through the phone speaker immediately, sharp and unyielding. National college entrance exam security is rigorous beyond belief. Cheating carries severe criminal penalties. How can you accuse your own daughter of such a serious offense without a single shred of proof? She ended the call abruptly, cutting Dad off mid-sentence before he could offer any weak rebuttal. Mom swayed unsteadily on her feet, clutching the edge of the dining table to stay upright, her mind reeling from the conflicting truths crashing down all at once. 655 points. Summer actually earned a spot at National University of Defense Technology. Dad's hands shook uncontrollably, a bitter, regretful smile tugging at his mouth as he replayed the fight from the previous day in his head. She told us the discarded folder held her acceptance letter yesterday, and we all brushed her off like she was lying. We let her run to the waste plant alone to dig through garbage for hours. None of us cared enough to follow her. Ethan and Nina sat motionless, their faces ashen, too guilty to utter a single word. Adrian's empty gaze locked on the front door, realizing he'd lost the girl he'd promised to marry before he'd ever understood the full extent of how he'd wronged her. Mom scrambled for her cell phone, fingers shaking so badly she could barely tap my contact number, desperate to reach me and beg for a chance to apologize. Sorry, the number you have dialed is no longer in service. She tried calling 3 more times, every attempt met with the same automated disconnect message. She pulled up our WeChat chat thread next, sending a frantic apology message, only to be met with a system notification that her message had failed to send. She'd been fully blocked. Ethan and Adrian both pulled out their own phones, trying to call and message me, only to discover every single one of their contact accounts had been blocked without exception. Dad sank back into his dining chair, a hollow, defeated look settling over his features. She blocked every single one of us. She never intended to come back home after she left this morning. Mom finally broke down into loud, racking sobs, tears streaming down her cheeks as the full weight of 6 years of unfair bias and neglect crashed over her all at once. Summer, where did you go? After Mom, Dad, Ethan, and Adrian spent hours spamming my blocked lines with unanswered calls and failed messages, panic finally pushed them to dial the local police non-emergency line to file a missing person report. Nina lingered in the background the whole time, eyes red but silent, no attempt to step forward and admit she'd thrown my life-changing acceptance letter in the trash. The uniformed officers arrived at the house 40 minutes later, notebook in hand to record every detail of my disappearance. Mom rambled through tears about our fight over the wooden rocket model and the discarded folder, still framing me as the unreasonable, volatile teen who'd stormed off over trivial junk instead of owning up to Nina's destructive actions. Dad kept cutting in to repeat the false belief that I'd only scored well in the college exam through cheating, his words making the 2 patrol officers exchange quiet, confused glances. Once they finished taking statements, the lead officer pulled up transit and passenger records on his tablet without delay. His thumb swiped across the screen, scrolling through high-speed railway passenger manifests before he spoke in a calm, matter-of-fact tone that stripped away all the family's half-baked excuses. Your daughter Summer purchased an early morning ticket bound for National University of Defense Technology 2 days ago. Surveillance footage from the station confirms she boarded the train alone at dawn today. Her student ID and campus registration were already verified by university administration an hour ago. She's safely checked into the freshman dormitory. No danger to report here. Mom's sobs cut off mid-breath, the frantic energy draining straight out of her body. She clung to the delusion that I was wandering somewhere hurt or lost, clinging to a chance to rush out and beg forgiveness, only to learn I'd already put hundreds of miles between us with zero hesitation. The officer closed his notebook, giving them a sharp, gentle warning before heading back to his patrol car. This is a family conflict rooted in long-term, unfair treatment from what we've gathered. We can't force a young adult to return to a household that's made her feel unwelcome for years. The rest of this resolution falls entirely on your family to work through yourselves. The second police cruisers pulled away from the curb. Word of our household chaos spread like wildfire through the extended family network. Distant aunts, uncles, and cousins who'd attended Nina's lavish college banquet began sharing the full story behind my disappearance over group chats and weekend phone calls. How they'd stuck me at the entrance logging cash gifts while Nina soaked up all the praise. How they'd mocked my aerospace dream. How Nina tossed my top-tier university acceptance into household garbage. And how everyone instantly labeled me a cheater the second they learned my exam score of 655. Within 3 days, every relative within a 50-mile radius knew the full truth, and our household became the main subject of quiet, judgmental whispers at every family gathering. The harshest reckoning came when my maternal grandmother showed up unannounced at the front door, wooden walking cane clutched tight in her grip, fury radiating off her frame before she even stepped over the threshold. Grandma barely waited for Mom to close the front door before raising the cane and tapping it hard against Mom's shoulders, her voice booming with unfiltered rage that echoed through every room of the house. I can't believe you've all lost your senses entirely. You sacrificed your own blood daughter for a foster girl out of misplaced guilt over a car crash that wasn't even Summer's fault. Mom crumpled onto the living room sofa, shoulders shaking with silent tears, too ashamed to lift her head and meet Grandma's furious stare. Grandma paced back and forth across the carpet, cane thudding against the floor with every sharp step as she recounted all the pain I'd endured over 6 long years of forced low grades and endless neglect. You forced that child to intentionally flunk every exam to keep Nina from throwing tantrums and threatening self-harm. Do you know how many national scholarship opportunities she missed out on just to spare Nina's fragile ego? She could have locked in full university funding without spending a cent of your money, and you threw every chance away for a girl who isn't even related to you by blood. Nina hovered in the hallway out of sight, pressing herself flat against the wall to avoid Grandma's unforgiving glare, too cowardly to step forward and take responsibility for throwing my admission letter away. Ethan tried to step between Grandma and Mom to calm her down, only for Grandma to swing the cane lightly in his direction to stop him cold. Don't you dare intervene either, Ethan. You're just as guilty as your parents, handing Nina brand new flagship electronics while passing off your beat-up 3-month laptop to your own sister, mocking her rocket dream to her face when Dad spent hours carving that wooden model for her 10th birthday. Grandma's words landed like heavy stones, every accusation hitting a wound none of them could deny. She paused to catch her breath, her tone softening slightly into bitter sorrow as she looked at the family banner still hanging above the dining room, only printed for Nina's college celebration, no matching banner ever made for me. You hosted an entire expensive banquet for Nina and made Summer stand alone at the door counting cash envelopes while all the relatives celebrated her success. You handed every dollar of that gift money straight to Nina as a college stipend while planning to force Summer into minimum wage part-time labor just to afford a community college no one believed she'd ever escape. Mom buried her face in her hands, loud, broken sobs finally breaking free after holding them back through Grandma's whole lecture. There was no defense she could offer. Every harsh truth Grandma spoke was one she'd known deep down for years, too wrapped up in guilt over Nina's dead parents to ever correct her biased behavior. Grandma sighed heavily, lowering her cane to rest against the sofa arm, her anger fading into weary disappointment. I'm leaving you all to sit with this mess you've created. Think long and hard about how you tossed away a brilliant, loyal daughter for a girl who only takes and never gives back. I won't step foot in this house again until you all truly understand the damage you've done to Summer. Ethan and Adrian walked Grandma back to her car once she finished speaking, neither daring to argue a single point she'd made. Once they returned inside the silent house, Ethan slammed his fist hard against the dining table, frustration boiling over as he tried to shift blame away from the family's collective cruelty. This is all Summer's fault at the end of the day. She deliberately hid her exam scores from us just to humiliate everyone once the truth came out, letting us make fools of ourselves in front of all our relatives. The second the words left his mouth, Mom lifted her hand and delivered a sharp, heavy slap straight across his cheek, the sound ringing loud through the empty dining room. Nina darted forward instantly to shield Ethan from further anger, her eyes glistening with manufactured tears as she clung to his arm. Mom, don't hit brother. It isn't his fault any of this happened. Ethan clutched his stinging cheek, completely stunned by Mom's sudden outburst, unable to wrap his head around why she'd struck him after 6 years of always taking his side against me. Mom's chest heaved with grief and unspoken regret, tears streaming nonstop down her cheeks as she stared at all of them one by one, her voice raw and cracked from hours of crying. How can you still refuse to take responsibility for what we've done? We're the ones who pushed Summer to hide her talents, the ones who laughed at her aerospace dream, the ones who brushed off her panic when her acceptance letter went missing. She didn't do this to us. We drove her out of this house with years of unfair treatment and blind favoritism toward Nina. Mom's gaze drifted to Nina lingering beside Ethan, and for the first time since the orphan girl moved into our home, her eyes held nothing but cold, unmasked distaste instead of the endless warmth and adoration she'd showered on her for 6 years. She didn't raise her voice or snap at Nina, but the shift in her expression spoke volumes. The misplaced guilt that had blinded her for so long had finally worn thin, leaving only clear regret for the daughter she'd abandoned for a stranger. Dad sank onto the sofa beside her, wrapping a shaky arm around her trembling shoulders, both of them staring blankly at the empty space where I'd always sat alone at family meals. The whole household fell into a heavy, suffocating silence, no one daring to break it with empty excuses or more blame shifting. Adrian stood by the window, staring out at the empty street where I'd walked away after calling off our childhood engagement, his chest tight with crushing regret as he replayed every cruel comment he'd directed toward me over the years. Major plot twist 4. Ethan discovers Nina's hidden storage box full of my stolen advanced study notebooks, proving she sabotaged my grades on purpose for 6 years. Later that same evening, Ethan headed to the spare storage closet in the garage to retrieve extra moving boxes for Nina's upcoming dorm move. He reached for a stack of plastic bins tucked in the back corner, and a locked decorative storage box slid off the top shelf, clattering open on the concrete floor to spill its contents across the ground. To his horror, every item scattered across the garage floor belonged to me, found advanced math and aerospace workbooks, locked secret study journals filled with complex rocket design drafts, printed competition practice exams I'd spent hundreds of hours completing after everyone else fell asleep at night. Ethan knelt down to flip through the notebooks, every page filled with detailed, high-level problem-solving far beyond the curriculum taught at our local high school. Tucked inside the front cover of the top workbook was a small handwritten note scrawled in Nina's distinct handwriting, dated the first semester of sophomore year, the same time I'd started scoring slightly higher on exams after a brief break from intentional grade tanking. If Summer keeps studying this hard, everyone will stop paying attention to me. Hide these every week, so she can't use them to get good scores on tests. A cold wave of realization crashed over Ethan as he flipped through dozens more identical notes tucked between notebook pages, all dated across every semester of my 4 years in high school. Nina hadn't just accidentally tossed my acceptance letter out of thoughtlessness. She'd actively sabotaged my academic progress for 6 full years, stealing my secret study materials every single week to guarantee I'd remain ranked dead last on every in-class exam, deliberately feeding the family's false belief that I was lazy and unintelligent to keep all their affection focused solely on herself. Ethan gathered all the stolen notebooks into a single pile and carried them back into the house, dropping the stack onto the dining room table in front of Nina without a single word. Her face drained of all color the second she spotted her own handwriting on the loose notes tucked between the workbook pages, her fake tearful expression vanishing instantly into cold, panicked guilt. Mom and Dad leaned forward to read the handwritten sabotage notes, their regret deepening tenfold as they realized Nina's manipulation had fueled every unfair judgment they'd cast on me for half a decade. Adrian picked up one of my rocket design journals, skimming pages covered in intricate hand-drawn spacecraft blueprints I'd kept hidden from the whole family for years, his throat tight with shame as he remembered mocking my aerospace dream to my face only days before my elite exam score came to light. The full scope of Mina's calculated deception laid bare before all of them, and none could find a single word to excuse her 6 years of intentional sabotage and manipulation.